The little girl's eyes rolled back. Her small body convulsed once, twice, then went completely limp on the mosque floor. One moment, 7-year-old Amira had been sitting peacefully during the Quran study circle. The next, the instant Sheikh Rahman uttered the name Iblis, while explaining Surah Al-Hijr, she collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. But it wasn't the fainting that made everyone's blood run cold. It was what she said 40 minutes later, when she finally opened her eyes in the hospital emergency room. "He's not in hell yet," Amira whispered, staring at something none of them could see. "He's still here, walking among us, and he told me the exact date he'll be cast into the fire." The imam who heard those words went pale. The doctors had no medical explanation. Her parents couldn't understand how their innocent daughter knew things about Iblis that weren't even written in tafsir books. Why would a child faint at the mere mention of Shaitan's name? What did she see during those 40 minutes of unconsciousness? And why did 3 senior scholars refuse to speak with her after hearing what she revealed? This is a true story that happened in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, just 18 months ago. It's a story so unsettling, so profound, that it will change everything you think you know about spiritual warfare and the innocence of children. I ask you to listen until the very end, because there is a lesson here that every Muslim parent, every believer, needs to understand. Before I continue with what happened to little Amira, please make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Leave a comment telling me which country you're watching from. Your engagement helps us share more stories that bridge the seen and unseen worlds of our faith. Now let me take you back to where this all truly began. Not in the mosque that day, but 3 weeks earlier, in Amira's home. Amira binti Yusuf was not an ordinary 7-year-old. In a world where children her age were obsessed with cartoons and tablets, Amira had memorized 12 juz of the Quran. Her voice during tahajjud prayers would make her mother weep, so pure, so filled with a devotion that seemed beyond her years. "She's an old soul," her grandmother would say, watching Amira pray with a focus that adults struggle to maintain. "Allah has blessed her with a special light." The family lived in a modest apartment in Ampang, Kuala Lumpur. Yusuf, the father, worked as an accountant. Noor, the mother, was a preschool teacher. They were simple people, devout but not extreme, who had raised their only daughter with love and Islamic values. But 3 weeks before the incident at the mosque, something changed. Amira stopped sleeping through the night. Noor would find her daughter sitting up in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the corner of her room with an expression that was neither fearful nor peaceful, just intensely focused, as if watching something unfold. "Amira, Habibti, what's wrong?" Noor asked the first time. "Why aren't you sleeping?" "I'm listening, Mama," Amira replied simply. "Someone is talking, but not with words, with feelings, dark feelings." Noor felt a chill. She recited Ayatul Kursi, sprinkled Zamzam water around the room, played Surah Al-Baqarah on low volume, but night after night she would find Amira awake, listening to something only she could perceive. The child's appetite disappeared. She picked at her food, her eyes distant. At school, her teacher called to say Amira had been found in the bathroom, tracing strange patterns on the mirror with wet fingers, symbols that looked almost like Arabic letters, but distorted, wrong. "I'm writing what he's showing me," Amira told her teacher innocently. "He wants me to remember." Who was he? What was she seeing? And why did this pure, Quran-reciting child suddenly seem to be receiving transmissions from somewhere dark? Noor and Yusuf did what many Muslim parents would do. They consulted with their local imam, Sheikh Rahman al-Maliki, a respected scholar known for his knowledge of both traditional Islamic sciences and cases of spiritual affliction. Sheikh Rahman was in his 60s, with a silver beard and eyes that had witnessed many unexplainable things during his 40 years of service. He listened carefully as the parents described their daughter's behavior, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "Bring her to the mosque tomorrow evening," he finally said. "After Maghrib, we have our youth Quran study circle. Let me observe her in a spiritual environment. Sometimes children are sensitive to things adults have learned to block out. Sometimes this sensitivity is a curse. Sometimes it's a gift." "But Sheikh," Yusuf said hesitantly, "what if she disturbs the other children? What if—" "Then we will know for certain that this requires ruqya," the imam interrupted gently. "But let's not assume the worst. Perhaps she's simply going through a phase of spiritual awakening. Children process faith differently than we do." That evening, Noor couldn't sleep. She kept checking on Amira, who was finally resting peacefully for the first time in weeks. In the dim glow of the Quran nightlight, her daughter looked like an angel, innocent, pure, untouched by the world's darkness. But at 2:47 a.m., Noor woke to a sound that made her heart stop. Amira was laughing, not the joyful giggle of a child, but a low, knowing chuckle that belonged to someone far older, far more aware of the world's cruelties. Noor rushed to her daughter's room. Amira was still asleep, but her lips were moving, forming words in a language Noor didn't recognize. It wasn't Arabic, Turkish, Urdu, or Malay, the languages their family knew. It was something ancient, guttural, with sounds that seemed to scrape against reality itself. The moment Noor touched her daughter's shoulder, Amira's eyes snapped open, fully dilated, seeing, but not seeing. 7 days, Amira said in a voice that was hers, but wasn't. In 7 days, everyone will know. He promised to show me. Then she closed her eyes and slept peacefully as if nothing had happened. In the morning, she remembered nothing. The Quran study circle met every Tuesday evening in the smaller prayer hall of the Masjid an-Nur. 20 children, ages 6 to 12, sat in a semicircle around Sheikh Rahman, who was teaching them Surah al-Hijr, the chapter about the angels, the creation of Adam, and the rebellion of Iblis. Amira sat between 2 other girls, holding her pink Quran with the golden edges her grandmother had gifted her. She seemed normal that evening, attentive, calm, even smiling when the sheikh made a gentle joke about how difficult tajweed can be. Noor watched from the women's section behind the partition, her heart gradually unclenching. Perhaps Sheikh Rahman was right. Perhaps this was just a phase, and surrounding Amira with Quran and community was exactly what she needed. The sheikh reached verse 31. "And mention when your Lord said to the angels, 'Indeed, I am going to create a human being from clay. So when I have proportioned him and breathed into him of my created soul, then fall down to him in prostration.' So the angels prostrated, all of them entirely, except Iblis. The name hung in the air. Iblis, Shaitan, the accursed one who refused to bow, who earned Allah's wrath, who became humanity's eternal enemy. The moment Sheikh Rahman pronounced that name, Iblis, 3 things happened simultaneously. Every light in the mosque flickered. The speakers playing the Adhan recording in the background emitted a burst of static, and Amira binti Yusuf let out a scream that didn't sound like it came from a 7-year-old girl. It was the scream of someone witnessing something terrible, something that would break an adult's sanity. Her small body jerked backward, convulsing as if struck by an invisible force. White foam appeared at the corners of her mouth. Her eyes rolled back until only the whites were visible. Then she collapsed, hitting the mosque carpet with a sickening thud. Chaos erupted. Children screamed. Parents rushed forward. Sheikh Rahman dropped to his knees beside the unconscious child, immediately beginning to recite Ayatul Kursi with an urgency that made everyone understand. This was not a normal medical emergency. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. "She's having a seizure." But Noor, pushing through the crowd to reach her daughter, saw something the others didn't. Amira wasn't seizing. She was completely still, almost peaceful, as if her soul had simply decided to step out of her body for a while, and on her lips, barely visible, was a smile that suggested she was finally understanding something she'd been trying to comprehend for weeks. The ambulance ride to Hospital Kuala Lumpur took 12 minutes. Amira remained unconscious the entire time, her vital signs stable, but her consciousness seemingly unreachable. The paramedics tried everything, smelling salts, painful stimuli, calling her name, but the little girl didn't respond. "It's like she's in a deep sleep," one paramedic said, confused. "But her brain activity is normal. She's not seizing, not in a coma. She's just somewhere else." Noor held her daughter's hand, reciting every prayer she knew. Yusuf, who had rushed from his office, sat rigid with fear, watching his only child breathe but not wake. At the hospital, Dr. Tan, a no-nonsense emergency physician who had seen everything from dengue fever to motorcycle accidents, was equally baffled. All the tests came back normal. No fever, no trauma, no toxins in her blood, no neurological abnormalities. "Mrs. Noor," Dr. Tan said carefully, "has your daughter experienced any psychological stress recently? Any trauma at school? Any changes at home?" "No," Noor said firmly. "She's a happy child, a pious child. She memorizes Quran. She prays. Her voice broke. "Please, doctor, why won't she wake up?" 40 minutes passed. In Islamic tradition, 40 is a significant number. 40 days, 40 nights, 40 years. The Quran mentions it repeatedly. Moses spent 40 nights on Mount Sinai. The flood of Noah lasted 40 days. 40 is the number of completion, of transformation, and after exactly 40 minutes of unconsciousness, Amira opened her eyes. But they were different eyes, still brown, still innocent, but carrying knowledge that shouldn't exist in a 7-year-old. She looked at her mother, then at her father, then at Dr. Tan, and finally at Sheikh Rahman, who had followed them to the hospital. "I saw him," she said quietly, in a voice that was suddenly too mature, too certain. "I saw Iblis, and he showed me things. Things about the end, things about the beginning, things no one alive is supposed to know yet." The room went silent. Even Dr. Tan, who didn't understand Arabic or Islamic theology, felt the weight of those words. "Amira," Sheikh Rahman said gently, kneeling beside her hospital bed, "tell me what you saw, my child. Tell me exactly what Shaitan showed you." What Amira said next would be recorded, debated, and feared by scholars for months to come. But first, she asked a question that made everyone's blood freeze. Why did Allah create him if he knew Iblis would rebel? "I saw the answer, and it's not what you've been teaching us." Sheikh Rahman didn't answer Amira's question immediately. Instead, he did something unexpected. He asked everyone except Noor and Yusuf to leave the hospital room. Dr. Tan protested, but something in the Imam's eyes made her comply. She stepped out, leaving the Muslim family alone with questions that medicine couldn't answer. "Amira," the Sheikh began carefully, "I need you to tell me everything. But first, I need to know, are you speaking with your own mind or is something speaking through you?" It was a test, a question designed to detect spiritual possession. If a jinn or shaitan was manipulating the child, they would resist such direct questioning, or respond with anger, or demonstrate knowledge the child couldn't possess. Amira tilted her head, considering the question with an eerie calmness. "It's me, Sheikh. I promise by Allah it's me. But I know things now that I didn't know before. He showed me, not to possess me, not to hurt me, but because—" She paused, struggling to find words. "Because children can carry messages that adults won't believe. You would have dismissed a dream. You would have rationalized a vision. But this, you can't ignore this." "What did you see?" Noor whispered, gripping her daughter's hand. Amira closed her eyes, and when she spoke it was as if she was reading from a book that only she could see. When Allah said to the angels, "Bow to Adam," Iblis already knew what would happen. He knew he would refuse. He knew he would be cursed. But he did it anyway because his purpose was never to serve alongside the angels. His purpose was to be humanity's test. He volunteered for this role, knowing it would cost him paradise. Sheikh Rahman's face went pale. This was not standard Islamic teaching. This was a theological interpretation that only the most advanced scholars debated, and even they disagreed on it. "Who told you this?" he demanded. "Where did you hear these words?" "I didn't hear them," Amira said, opening her eyes. "I saw them. When I fainted, I wasn't unconscious. I was somewhere else. A place that's not heaven, not hell, but between, where truth exists without human interpretation. And I saw Iblis there, standing before the throne, before the fall. And I heard him say to Allah, if humanity is to have free will, they must have someone who tests them. I will be that one. I will bear your wrath so they can prove their love." Yusuf stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. "This is blasphemy. This is making Shaitan seem like a servant?" Amira interrupted gently. "Isn't that what he is, Baba? An accursed servant, yes. A disobedient servant, yes. But still serving Allah's ultimate plan? Everything exists by his permission, even rebellion, even evil. Because without the possibility of evil, there is no such thing as righteousness. There's only programming." The room fell silent. A 7-year-old had just articulated a theological paradox that had troubled Islamic philosophers for centuries. The problem of predestination versus free will, the question of why Allah allows Shaitan to exist. Sheikh Rahman pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "I need to contact some people, scholars who specialize in unusual cases. This child has either experienced a genuine spiritual revelation or she's under a very sophisticated form of spiritual deception. Either way, we need help beyond my knowledge." "What do you mean, deception?" Noor asked fearfully. "Are you saying something evil is speaking through my daughter?" "I'm saying I don't know," the Imam admitted, "and that terrifies me more than any possession I've ever witnessed. Because if she's telling the truth, if she genuinely saw what she claims, then we're dealing with knowledge that even prophets weren't always given. And that means someone, or something, wanted her to know this. The question is, why?" Amira smiled sadly, as if she knew exactly why, but also knew they weren't ready to hear the full answer yet. Over the next 3 days, Amira was examined by 5 different Islamic scholars, a Syrian mufti visiting Malaysia, a local ustaza who specialized in children's religious psychology, a Pakistani expert in spiritual afflictions, and 2 professors from the International Islamic University. They questioned her separately and together, testing her knowledge, her sincerity, her mental state. Every single one left disturbed. "She knows things," the Syrian mufti told Sheikh Rahman privately. "Details about Quranic events that exist only in ancient tafsir manuscripts that aren't even translated into English or Malay. A 7-year-old couldn't possibly have read them, yet she describes them with perfect accuracy." The Pakistani expert was even more troubled. "I performed ruqya on her. Full verses from Al-Baqarah, Ayatul Kursi, the Muawwidhatayn. Every verse that burns jinn and shayateen. She didn't flinch, didn't react. If she were possessed, those verses would have caused some response. But there's nothing. She's clean, which means what she experienced was either genuine spiritual revelation or some form of mental illness presenting with religious content. She's not mentally ill," the children's psychology expert said firmly. "I've assessed her. She shows no signs of schizophrenia, psychosis, or dissociative disorders. She's a bright, emotionally stable child who happens to have experienced something extraordinary." The breakthrough came when they brought in Sheikh Dr. Ibrahim Farouk, a scholar of Islamic mysticism, and the spiritual experiences of the awliya, the friends of Allah, who occasionally receive divine knowledge beyond ordinary means. Dr. Farouk spent 6 hours with Amira over 2 days. He didn't interrogate her like the others. Instead, he simply talked with her, asking about her life, her prayers, her relationship with Allah, and gradually she opened up to him in ways she hadn't with the others. "She's experiencing what we call kashf," Dr. Farouk explained to the assembled scholars and Amira's parents on the 3rd day. "Spiritual unveiling. It's rare, especially in children, but it's documented throughout Islamic history. Rabia al-Basri experienced it. Imam al-Ghazali wrote about it. It's when the barriers between the material and spiritual realms temporarily thin, and a person perceives truths that are usually hidden." "But why her?" Noor asked. "Why our daughter? Why not her?" Dr. Farouk replied gently. "Children are often more spiritually sensitive than adults. We haven't taught them yet to disbelieve in their own perceptions, and Amira is already a hafiza in training, someone who fills her heart with Allah's words. She's created a vessel that can receive extraordinary things." "So you believe what she saw is true?" Sheikh Rahman asked carefully. "That Iblis volunteered for his role as humanity's tempter?" Dr. Farouk was quiet for a long moment. "I believe she saw something true, whether it's the complete truth or a truth seen from one angle, or a truth that our human minds aren't equipped to fully understand, that I cannot say. But I'll tell you what troubles me most. She mentioned a date." Everyone in the room tensed. They all remembered. Amira had said in that first moment of waking that she knew when Iblis would be cast into the fire. "She told me the date," Dr. Farouk continued, "and she explained what it meant. I cannot repeat it publicly. It would cause fitna, chaos, misunderstanding. But I can tell you this. If what she says is true, then we are living in times that are far more spiritually significant than any of us realized. The end is not as far away as we've convinced ourselves it is." Yusuf felt his legs go weak. "How far?" "That's not for me to say, or for her to say. The Prophet himself said the knowledge of the hour belongs to Allah alone. But what Amira saw suggests that the mechanisms are already in motion. The pieces are already being moved into place. And humanity, as always, is too distracted to notice." Later that evening, when the scholars had left and Amira was finally sleeping peacefully in her own bed at home, Noor found a journal on her daughter's desk. It was new. She'd never seen it before. Inside, in Amira's careful handwriting, was a single sentence repeated over and over on every page. "Every soul has a shaitan assigned to it, even the prophets. But the prophets learned to make their shaitan submit to Islam. That's the real jihad. Not killing the devil, but converting him." Noor closed the journal with shaking hands. Where had her 7-year-old learned this? And more importantly, was it true? Word began to spread. Despite everyone's best efforts to keep Amira's experience private, whispers moved through the community. The girl who saw shaitan, the child who was given forbidden knowledge, the little hafiza who spoke with Iblis. The family's mosque became divided. Some people brought their children to meet Amira, hoping her blessing might rub off. Others kept their children away, fearing she was touched by something dark. A few elderly aunties suggested the family move away, find a new mosque, protect their daughter from the attention. Sheikh Rahman faced his own crisis. Should he allow Amira to continue attending Quran classes? What if she had another episode? What if other children were affected? Yet how could he turn away a child who genuinely loved Allah's words? The most difficult question, however, fell on Noor and Yusuf. Should they suppress their daughter's experiences, teach her to stay quiet about what she saw, protect her by forcing her to be normal? Or should they accept that Allah had chosen their child for something unusual, possibly even important? The answer came from an unexpected source. Amira's grandmother, Tokwan Siti, was 92 years old, a woman who had survived the Japanese occupation, had buried 3 of her 6 children, and had made Hajj 4 times. She arrived at their apartment one evening without warning, taking a 6-hour bus ride from her village despite her advanced age. "I came because I had a dream," Tokwan Siti said simply, sitting across from Noor and Yusuf in their small living room. "The Prophet appeared to me and said, 'The child sees truly, let her speak. The Ummah needs to remember that we are surrounded by the unseen. They have forgotten. They think this world is all that matters. Let the child remind them.'" Noor began to cry. "But Tokwan, people are saying terrible things. They call her possessed. They call her cursed. They say we're making it up for attention." "Let them talk," the old woman said firmly. "Every prophet was called a liar. Every truthful person was called mad. If my great-granddaughter has been given a gift of spiritual sight, then you have no right to bury it because you fear what people will say." "But what if we're wrong?" Yusuf argued. "What if this isn't from Allah? What if we're allowing our daughter to spread confusion?" Tokwan Siti stood up with difficulty and walked to Amira's room. The girl was awake, reading her Quran by nightlight. The grandmother sat on the edge of the bed and took the child's small hands in her wrinkled ones. "Amira, Habibti, look at me. What you saw. Do you believe it was truth or lies?" Amira didn't hesitate. "Truth, Tokwan. I know it was truth because it made everything make sense. The Quran says Allah is Al-Hakim, the All-Wise. Everything he does has wisdom, even the things that seem bad. Iblis seems bad. But what if his existence is part of the wisdom? What if we need him to become who we're supposed to be?" The old woman smiled, tears in her eyes. "Then you must not be afraid to say what you know. But you must also be wise. Truth shared unwisely becomes fitna. Truth shared with wisdom becomes guidance. Do you understand?" "I think so," Amira said. "I should only tell people who are ready to hear." "Exactly." That night, the family made a decision. They would not hide Amira's experience. But they would not sensationalize it either. She would continue her normal life, school, Quran memorization, playing with friends. But when someone genuinely sought to understand what she had experienced, someone who came with sincerity rather than judgment, she would share what she knew. The test was not whether to speak or to stay silent. The test was learning to discern who needed to hear the truth and who would only weaponize it. 3 weeks after the incident, Sheikh Rahman invited Amira and her parents to the mosque for a special gathering. Several renowned scholars from across Southeast Asia had arrived, having heard about the case. They wanted to hear directly from the child, to understand what she had experienced. Noor was terrified. Yusuf was protective. But Amira was calm, almost expectant, as if she'd known this moment would come. The gathering took place in the main prayer hall after Isha. 30 people were present, mostly scholars and imams, but also a few students of Islamic knowledge. They sat in a circle with Amira at the center, a small figure in her white telekung, looking impossibly young against the backdrop of bearded men and elderly ustaza. Sheikh Dr. Ibrahim Farouk spoke first. "Amira binti Yusuf, we have come not to judge you but to understand. Islamic history is filled with people who experienced kashf, spiritual unveiling. The Sahaba experienced it. The Awliya experienced it, but it's rare in our modern age and rarer still in children. We want to hear in your own words what happened when you heard the name of Iblis in this mosque." Amira was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then she began to speak, and her voice carried a clarity that belied her age. "When Sheikh Rahman said his name, it was like someone opened a door in my mind, and I fell through that door into another place. It wasn't a dream. Dreams are fuzzy and you forget them. This was sharp and clear, and I remember every second. I was in a place that was neither dark nor light. It was like standing between 2 mirrors that reflect each other forever. And I saw him, Iblis. But he didn't look scary. He looked sad. So sad. Like someone who chose to give up everything because he loved something more. And he looked at me and said, "They teach you that I rebelled out of pride, that I refused to bow because I thought I was better than Adam. But tell them the truth, little daughter of Hawa. Tell them that I knew that if I bowed, there would be no test, no choice, no proof of love. Allah's mercy would have no meaning if there was no one to test it against. His forgiveness would have no value if there was no sin. I took the burden," he told me. "I became the cursed one, so that every human who chooses Allah despite my whispers proves something greater than any angel's obedience. Because angels have no choice. They're created to worship. But humans have me. And every time they say no to me and yes to Allah, they demonstrate what love actually means. Choice, sacrifice, struggle. Do you understand, child?" he asked me. "I am the villain in your story, so that you can be the heroes in yours." The prayer hall was utterly silent. Several scholars had tears streaming down their faces. Others looked troubled, struggling with theological implications. A few were shaking their heads, unable to accept this interpretation. Then something extraordinary happened. Amira stood up, walked to the mihrab where the imam leads prayers, and said something that would be debated in Islamic institutions for years to come. "He's watching us right now, Iblis. He watches everything. And he asked me to give you a message. He said, 'Tell the believers that I am not their friend and I never will be. I am their enemy as Allah declared me to be. But tell them also that every time they overcome me, every time they resist, every time they choose good over my whispers, I am fulfilling my purpose. And in some strange way, so are they. We are locked in a dance that will continue until the day of judgment. And when that day comes and I am cast into the fire, I will go knowing that I served Allah's plan even through my curse, because everything is part of His design." The climax came not with drama, but with a simple question from the youngest scholar present, a man in his 30s who taught Islamic philosophy. "Amira," he asked carefully, "did Iblis tell you he regrets his choice?" Amira looked directly at him, and when she spoke, it was with absolute certainty. "No. He said he would make the same choice again, because the alternative, a world without real choice, without real tests, would be a prison of predetermined righteousness, and that's not the world Allah wanted to create." The scholars debated for 3 hours after Amira and her parents left. Some called her experience a genuine revelation. Others suggested she had internalized advanced theological concepts without realizing it. A few insisted it was spiritual deception, Iblis himself manipulating a child to spread confusion. But one thing everyone agreed on: Amira had fundamentally challenged them to reconsider questions they thought they'd answered long ago. Why does Allah allow evil to exist? Why does He permit Shaitan to tempt us? Is the existence of evil necessary for the existence of free will? Sheikh Dr. Farouk published a carefully worded paper titled "The Theology of Testing, Reconsidering the Purpose of Spiritual Opposition." He didn't explicitly endorse Amira's vision, but he argued that Islamic theology had room for the interpretation that Iblis's rebellion served a divine purpose within Allah's perfect plan. The paper caused controversy. Traditional scholars criticized it. Progressive scholars embraced it. Social media exploded with debates. Find the Sad Shaitan started trending in Muslim Twitter, with people arguing whether it was permissible to acknowledge that even evil serves Allah's ultimate wisdom. Amira herself became somewhat famous within Islamic education circles. She received invitations to speak at Islamic schools, to be interviewed for Muslim youth programs. Her parents declined most of them, trying to maintain some normalcy in their daughter's life, but the effects of that night rippled outward in unexpected ways. A teenage boy in Penang on the verge of suicide heard about Amira's experience and realized, if even Shaitan has a purpose in Allah's plan, then so do I. Even my struggles mean something. He called the suicide hotline instead. A woman in Singapore, who had left Islam years ago, found herself reconsidering. "I left because I couldn't reconcile a loving God with a world full of evil," she wrote in an online forum. "But what if evil isn't proof that God doesn't love us? What if it's proof that He trusts us with real choices?" A Western imam used Amira's story in a khutbah about free will, about how the greatest gift Allah gave humanity was the ability to choose Him despite everything that whispers otherwise. Not everyone believed Amira's experience was real. Many dismissed it. Some called her parents attention seekers. Others said the child had been coached. But the question she raised, Those couldn't be dismissed. As for Amira herself, she returned to her normal life. She continued memorizing the Quran, eventually completing all 30 juz by age 9. She played with her friends, did her homework, helped her mother cook. She was, in every visible way, an ordinary child. But sometimes, late at night, Noor would hear her daughter praying tahajjud, and the words were not from any traditional dua. They were her own words, having a conversation with Allah that sounded like someone who had glimpsed behind the curtain of reality and could never quite unsee it. Ya Allah, Amira would whisper, help me be grateful for the test. Help me understand that every whisper of shaitan is an opportunity to choose you again, and help me never forget that everything, even the things that seem evil, are part of your plan, even if I can't understand it yet. Those prayers gave Noor chills, because they came from a truth that her 7-year-old, now 8-year-old daughter understood better than most adults ever would. 2 years have passed since Amira fainted in the mosque. She's 9 now, about to turn 10. The attention has faded. The debates have moved on to other controversies. Life, as it always does, has returned to normal, but the lesson remains. What Amira experienced, whether you believe it was a genuine spiritual vision or a profound psychological experience that her young mind interpreted through Islamic symbolism, asks us to reconsider something fundamental. Why does evil exist in a world created by a perfectly good God? The standard answer is to test us, to give us free will, to make our choice to worship meaningful. But Amira's experience suggests something deeper. What if Iblis himself is part of that test, not as a rebel who escaped Allah's plan, but as an actor playing the role he was always meant to play? What if his curse is his service? What if his eternal punishment is the price he pays for giving humanity the gift of real choice? The Quran tells us that Allah is Al-Hakim, the All-Wise. Everything he does has wisdom, even the things we cannot understand, even suffering, even temptation, even Iblis. This doesn't make Shaitan our friend. The Quran explicitly calls him our enemy, but it invites us to see the bigger picture, that in Allah's infinite wisdom, even our enemies serve a purpose. Every whisper of Shaitan is an opportunity to strengthen our iman. Every test is a chance to choose Allah again. Before I leave you, I want you to reflect on something. In your own life, what are the Iblis moments, the temptations, the doubts, the whispers that pull you away from Allah? What if you stopped seeing those moments as failures and started seeing them as opportunities? Opportunities to prove, to yourself and to Allah, that you choose Him despite everything. If this story has moved you, changed you, challenged you, share it. Let others grapple with these questions. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories that explore the unseen dimensions of our faith. Amira binti Yusuf is still growing up, still learning, still experiencing her normal childhood, but she carries with her a truth that many adults struggle to accept, that we are surrounded by the unseen, that the spiritual realm is as real as the physical, and that sometimes, just sometimes, Allah pulls back the curtain and lets us glimpse truths that change everything. The last time I spoke with her family, Noor told me that Amira had said something that made her cry. They were doing homework together, and out of nowhere, Amira looked up and said, "Mama, I'm not special. What I saw, everyone could see if they opened their hearts." The problem is that adults have learned to close their eyes to anything that doesn't fit in a neat box. But Allah wants us to see. He wants us to know that this world is bigger and stranger and more purposeful than we imagine. Even the scary parts, even Iblis, especially Iblis. Because how can we be grateful for light if we've never known darkness? 9 years old and speaking like a sage. May Allah guide us all to see the wisdom in His plan, even the parts that frighten us. May He help us resist Shaitan's whispers, while understanding that even our resistance serves His purpose. And may He grant us the clarity that sometimes comes to children, the clarity to see truth without the filters of fear and doubt that we adults have learned to wear. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you all.